Welcome to Mr. Question Podcast. Ever walk into a movie like halfway through
Oh, yeah,
and everyone's talking about stuff and you're just lost?
definitely.
That's kind of how the financial world feels sometimes, right?
Yeah, I can see that.
Well, today we're looking at a company that's basically decided to just jump right into the deep end of the pool
Okay.
with Bitcoin. We're talking about MicroStrategy.
Yeah, and what's so interesting is that they're not like a crypto startup or something like that.
Right.
They built their name on, solid software.
They've been around.
But now they're making headlines and taking some really big bets by shifting like a huge chunk of their strategy to just holding Bitcoin.
So it's not just that they're like using Bitcoin for payments or something.
Right.
They're buying it as an investment.
Yep.
Why would a company that's already established want to do something so drastic?
It basically all goes back to their CEO, Michael Saylor.
Okay.
He's become like one of the loudest voices out there for Bitcoin. He really believes that it's the future of finance, like a much better system than what we have right now. And he's not just, talking about it. He's putting the company's money where his mouth is.
Okay, but we're talking like hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins?
Oh, yeah,
That's got to be insanely expensive.
for sure.
How can they afford to do that?
Well, they've been using like a two-part strategy.
Okay.
So first, they've been issuing more of their own stock.
Right, which is like a pretty standard way for companies to raise money.
Exactly. But then they've also been doing these things called convertible debt offerings.
Convertible debt.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of complicated. What does that even mean?
So basically, it's like a loan, but the lender has the option to convert that debt into company stock later on. So it lets MicroStrategy borrow money right now to buy up more Bitcoin
I see.
with the hope that, Bitcoin goes up in value enough to not just pay off the debt, but make a big profit.
So it's like they're borrowing money to fuel their Bitcoin buying. That sounds incredibly risky.
Oh, it definitely has a lot of risk.
Yeah.
But it really shows how strongly they believe in this.
Wow.
Just recently, they actually finished their biggest Bitcoin purchase ever, 51,780 Bitcoins for a crazy $4.6 billion.
Seriously.
Yeah, so now they're holding a total of 331,200 Bitcoins.
That is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
So if you look at the market price right now, that's worth something like $31 billion. Wow, that's a ton of money.
It is.
But okay, it's not just about buying Bitcoin, right?
Right.
This kind of aggressive strategy, it's got to be messing with their stock price too.
Oh, absolutely. MicroStrategy Stock, it trades under the symbol MSTR. It's basically tied to the price of Bitcoin now.
So they're linked.
Yeah, like when Bitcoin goes up, MSTR usually shoots up too.
Right.
And when Bitcoin drops, well, MSTR usually takes a hit. They're kind of on this wild ride together.
So are people buying MicroStrategy stock as a way to like indirectly invest in Bitcoin
Possibly.
without having to mess around with all the, exchanges and wallets and stuff?
Yeah, there's probably some of that happening,
Okay.
but it's not that simple. You see, MSTR is actually trading at what we call a premium compared to the real value of all the Bitcoin they own.
Wait, what does that mean? Trading at a premium.
So it means the stock is worth more than their Bitcoin.
Why would that be?
Well, that premium, it basically shows how much investors believe in MicroStrategy's whole strategy. It means they think the company's making a smart move, even though it looks risky to everyone else.
So they're buying into the idea that this will pay off big in the long run.
Exactly. They're betting on the potential for big future gains.
Okay, so they're buying, the stock's jumping around.
Yeah.
How do we even measure if this crazy strategy is actually working?
Right.
Is there like a Bitcoin scoreboard they're using?
That's where this thing called BTC yield comes in.
BTC yield.
It's basically a way to measure how much their Bitcoin holdings are growing, but it's measured against the number of shares they've issued. So think of it like a special kind of return on investment, but just focused on their Bitcoin stuff.
Gotcha. So I'm starting to see the whole picture here.
Yeah.
But even if this is all working for them, why should the average person even care about this whole MicroStrategy Bitcoin saga?
That's a great question.
It seems kind of like a high roller game for Wall Street,
Here's why it matters, even if you're not into Bitcoin or investing in MicroStrategy yourself.
Okay.
They're a big deal in the market, and what they do has ripple effects.
Okay.
Like when they buy tons of Bitcoin, it sends a message to other investors, and that can actually move the whole crypto market. It's kind of like they're making a splash and everyone's watching to see what happens.
Right. So are there other things that could impact them?
Oh, yeah. We can't forget about the regulators.
Yes. The government.
Exactly.
Always lurking.
They're watching everything MicroStrategy is doing really closely.
Okay.
And the whole world of crypto regulations, it's constantly changing.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of the Wild West out there.
For sure.
So even if they're doing well right now, there's a chance the rules could change and mess everything up.
Exactly. It adds another layer of risk to their strategy.
Right.
Governments everywhere are still trying to figure out how to deal with cryptocurrencies.
Yeah. Nobody seems to know what to do with it.
Right. And any new laws or restrictions they come up with could totally change MicroStrategy's ability to buy or even sell their Bitcoin.
He's like a ticking time bomb.
In a way, yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the risks, but let's look at the other side.
Okay.
What if it all goes right? What if Bitcoin just keeps going up?
Yeah.
Could MicroStrategy end up being like the ultimate example of a company that nailed it with Bitcoin?
If Bitcoin really takes off, they stand to make an insane amount of money.
And their BTC yield, the thing we talked about earlier.
Right, right. That's really high right now, which means their Bitcoin is growing way faster than the number of shares they're issuing.
So for those early investors who jumped on MSTR stock, it could be huge for them.
Oh, it could definitely be life-changing.
Oh.
But it's super important to remember that investing in MicroStrategy is basically like a supercharged bet on Bitcoin.
Okay.
The stock is volatile, like really volatile,
Got it.
and it practically moves in lockstep with Bitcoin. If you don't like risk, this is not the investment for you.
High risk, high reward, huh?
Yeah, pretty much. You need a strong stomach to handle those kinds of ups and downs.
That's not for the faint of heart.
Definitely not. And remember, Bitcoin itself is still relatively new.
Yeah.
Its future is still uncertain.
So even if I'm not personally interested in Bitcoin, this MicroStrategy story feels important.
I think so too.
It's like we're watching this big experiment play out in real time on a global scale.
Exactly.
So what are the big takeaways here? What should people be paying attention to?
Well, for one, it shows how much cryptocurrencies are starting to influence the global financial system. Whether you like Bitcoin or not, it's getting harder and harder to ignore.
That's true.
It also shows how companies are starting to change how they think about assets and investments.
Yeah, they're not just sticking to the old ways anymore.
Right. They're challenging the status quo and looking for new ways to manage their money.
So MicroStrategy's move, it could be like a sign of things to come.
Absolutely. As more companies get comfortable with Bitcoin, we could see a fundamental shift in how corporate treasuries operate.
It's almost like they're writing a new chapter in the history of finance.
It really is.
Yeah.
And we're all watching to see how it unfolds. The story of MicroStrategy and their bet on Bitcoin is far from over.
That's for sure.
It raises some really big questions about money, about the role of companies in the crypto world, and about how the global financial system is changing.
This deep dive has been wild. It's amazing to see a company go all in on something as volatile as Bitcoin, even though it's a little scary too.
Yeah, it definitely keeps things interesting.
Huge thanks to you for helping us understand all of this.
It's been my pleasure. I love exploring these new trends that are shaping the world.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, here's something to think about. What if other companies follow MicroStrategy's lead?
That's a good one.
What kind of ripple effects could that have on the entire financial system?
Yeah.
What would it mean for Bitcoin's future? That's a tough question, but it's definitely worth considering.
For sure.
We've been talking about this big move MicroStrategy made going all in on Bitcoin, and it's clear they're not messing around.
Yeah, they're definitely serious about it.
But as we've talked about, it's not without risk.
Oh, definitely.
Their stock is basically riding the Bitcoin roller coaster.
It's true. Up, down, who knows?
And that could mean big wins, but also big losses.
Right, exactly.
But their stock's still trading higher than the actual Bitcoin they have.
That's right.
Doesn't that mean investors are feeling pretty confident?
It does. It shows they believe in what MicroStrategy is doing for the long haul, even with all the risk. They're betting that the company knows what it's doing in this crazy crypto world.
They think they'll actually make money off their Bitcoin in the end.
That's the bet.
So it's more than just people being excited about Michael Saylor and his love for Bitcoin.
Yeah, there's some strategy behind it too.
It's not just blind faith.
Not entirely. Remember that BTC yield thing we talked about? Well, that shows they've been pretty good at growing their Bitcoin compared to how many shares they have out there.
So even with all the ups and downs, there's a way to see if it's working.
Exactly. It gives you a way to measure their success.
Okay, so there's a method to all this madness. But let's step back for a second.
Okay.
What does this whole MicroStrategy thing say about the bigger picture? Are they just a weird exception? Or are they like pioneers leading the way for a whole new era of how companies do finance?
I think what they're doing is a big sign of the times.
Okay.
More and more companies are starting to look at Bitcoin as a serious asset.
Hmm?
Some are even copying MicroStrategy and adding it to their own books.
So this could be the start of a much bigger trend.
It could be.
Could we see a future where companies having Bitcoin is as normal as having stocks and bonds?
It's definitely possible. If Bitcoin becomes more mainstream and proves it's valuable in the long run, we could see a huge change in how corporations handle their money.
That's kind of mind-blowing to think about.
It is.
What would that do to the global financial system?
That's a big question.
The whole thing.
It could impact everything.
Wow.
Currencies, monetary policy, global trade, investment flows. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
Yeah, that's a lot. Well, this deep dive has really given us a lot to think about.
It has.
MicroStrategy going all in on Bitcoin is a bold move, and who knows what it'll lead to.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story.
Huge thanks to you for explaining it all.
Happy to do it. It's always fun to explore these topics that really challenge how we think about things.
And for our listeners, we'll leave you with this. What if MicroStrategy actually pulls this off? What could that mean for Bitcoin and its place in the global economy? Could this be the beginning of a whole new way of doing corporate finance? It's something to really consider as we navigate this uncharted territory. Keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deep.